Welcome to the Pure Wellness Podcast, where we talk about what it takes to live a holistic lifestyle by making conscious, healthier choices. Our hope is that these discussions will inspire you to strengthen your daily practice to improve overall physical, mental, emotional, and social well-being. Pure Wellness Podcast provides information solely for educational purposes and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'm your host, Johanna Altman, founder of One Body Medicine, avid health enthusiast, and mother of three. Join me and industry professionals as we explore human potential in the pursuit of pure wellness. Welcome back to the Pure Wellness Podcast, where we dive into resilience, health, and hope. And today's guest needs little introduction, Montel Williams. For years, Montel has graced our television screen as a trusted voice and host. But behind the scenes, he has been fighting a very personal battle with MS. In this episode, Montel opens up about his diagnosis, the challenges with MS, and how he discovered cannabis as a powerful tool to manage chronic pain. Get ready for an honest, inspiring, and deeply personal conversation about courage, advocacy, and redefining what it means to live with a chronic illness. Let's dive in. Well, hi, Montel. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I'm excited to have you on the show, and you're such an inspiration to so many. You've had a very public health journey, which began in 1999 when you were diagnosed with MS. And at this point, you were at the very top of your game, and the Montel Williams show was a household name. I remember watching you every day. It was part of my life. You were in my living room. And many of us know you from your long career on television, but fewer know the depth of your health journey. Can you share the story of your MS diagnosis and what that moment was like for you?
Sure, but I think when you said, most people know me from my television journey, but I had a full career in the military before I started that. So I served I had 18 and a half years active, 22 years total in the U.S. military, both the Marine Corps and the Navy. I should have been diagnosed with MS in 1980. And unfortunately, got misdiagnosed for almost 20 years before I finally got correct diagnosis in the year of really 1999 and 2000. When the diagnosis finally came through, it literally was a relief almost, because to tell you the truth, I got sick of going to the doctors and doctors not understanding what was wrong with me for over 20 years. I got seen by some of the top doctors in this country, from Walter Reed, Johns Hopkins, Wells Eye Clinic, Harvard, Nobel Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. Everybody having, except for the Nobel Institute, having misdiagnosed me. They kind of got it right. So, to be honest with you, the official diagnosis is really the culmination of 20 years of misdiagnosis. So I got some relief out of that, finally understanding what was wrong with me.
So after the diagnosis, I did read your book, Living Well, 21 Days to Transform Your Life, which was an amazing book.
Thank you. It's one of 9 books I've written, but yes, you said my book.
One of the many. Yes. New York Times bestseller. And what I loved about the book is how you discussed all of these, your nutrition, your juicing, your exercise, and basically it takes 21 days to create a habit, and what you did to approach your diagnosis. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how integral that was in you getting better?
Well, I wrote the book that I wrote that's called Climbing Higher was really kind of my summary of that journey with MS. I followed it up with Living Well with Montel and then Living Well Emotionally, which were books that described how I approached my journey with MS. I think one of the most important things that any person should do, whether it be MS or any diagnosis that they don't understand, the first thing we need to do is to educate ourselves about what it is we think the diagnosis might be. And once we get the diagnosis, then educate ourselves on what that diagnosis is. Unfortunately, I say it this way, unfortunately, So many people rely only on what a doctor has to say. And I'm sorry, if all the doctors in the world were God, none of us would be sick. Since none of them are God, even though some of them like to play that way, I would throw it that way. Um, you know, it's better for us, number one, when I say us, I'm talking about the patient, to be our own advocate. The
That's
only way
right.
you can advocate for yourself is to have the knowledge to know what questions you're going to ask before you walk in the door. If I had paid attention to doctors, I would still not be diagnosed today because I went over 20 years being misdiagnosed by people who claim to be the top doctors in neurology, the top doctors in autoimmune disease, the top doctors in whatever. And all of them were relying on their PDR, the physician's death reference, when they look up the word MS. And back when I got diagnosed, you have to recognize that the PDR actually claimed MS was a disease of Caucasian females of Northern European descent. So how the heck can somebody who only looks at that information have any idea how to diagnose the fact that around the world, people of color have MS all over the world? So when I found that out, that really set me on my journey to figure out and understand that I have to know as much as anybody who claims to be an expert on this disease as they know, so that at least I have the right information to ask the right questions when I walk in the door. So that's something in a journey that, if you also look back at the year 2000, the internet was not as robust as it is and has become. There was no AI. So therefore, I spent a lot of time in libraries looking up information. Now you can find so much information online that sometimes I understand now why the medical community has some of the issues that it has, because with a disease like MS, you've probably got over 4,000 or 5,000 peer-reviewed published documents. That's a lifetime career reviewing all those peer-reviewed published documents to finally try to figure out, what's going on with this disease. So for me, what was paramount, most important, was trying my best to get as much information as I could about the disease, what might or might not impact the severity of some of the symptoms, and knowing that there is no answer, number one, as to the why, and there is no answer, number two, as to the cure. There's only some answers if you can extrapolate and put them together to understand that a disease like MS, which is an autoimmune disease, one of its primary nemesis is inflammation. So there's a lot of information out there about inflammation, how you can impact inflammation in your body. And so I set about a mission trying to reduce the amount of inflammation facing on a daily basis. And that's what caused me to write the book, Living Well with Montel, which wasn't just a book about MS, it was a book about how to see if we can mitigate some of the inflammation which would therefore hopefully reduce some of the symptoms. And for me, it worked.
Yeah. And what I loved about the book is that, as you said, back when you had the diagnosis, information wasn't as readily available as it is today. So you really had to go and get as much information as you could. And I love that you had mentioned reading that inflammation was the number one thing that you could really work with to try to minimize the symptoms of MS. And, you gave a lot of really great recipes, which I've tried. And, I think you were very advanced for your time, because being a health advocate, I feel more people are doing that now today because the information is readily available. But you're a pioneer in doing all of these anti-inflammatory, holistic. You're very big also in utilizing cannabis for pain. Can you talk a little bit more about that as well, and how that has helped you cope with a lot of the MS symptoms?
It's very, very funny, because even as of today, we still have ridiculous conversations at the governmental level, the legislative level, talking about the value of cannabis. And it always seems to come in as this adjunct or something over here that people are like, well, I've heard of cannabis. Well, first off, let's set the record really straight. Number one, back in 2002, really 2001, the federal government issued itself a patent on certain cannabinoids based on its ability to reduce inflammation, to help increase neural pathways. This is science that our government had studied and researched for 20 years before they finally decided to do that. Let's go back to the 1980s. 1980s, we were funding marijuana and cannabis research in places like Israel, outside of the United States. We were spending the dollars to fund Dr. Meshulam, who then people considered the godfather of cannabis. But Dr. Meshulam literally used American research dollars to discover, number one, the endocannabinoid system, which is a system in our body that produces our own endogenous cannabinoids. Number two, he's the person who discovered the receptors in our brains and our peripheral organs that actually receive cannabinoids, plant-based cannabinoids, and our endogenous own cannabinoids. As we looked at the research around endogenous cannabinoids, which is anandamide, 2-AG, and we probably will in the next 3 or 4 years discover even more. Mm-hmm. We've realized that our brain has, and I'm using this term lightly, I say it, our bodies have this secondary sympathetic kind of nervous system that runs in parallel with what we've known and has been taught in medical universities around the world for, hundreds of years. That secondary sympathetic nervous system, the endocannabinoid system, is responsible for so much. Finally, researchers finally trying to catch up. They're being taught at Harvard. It's being taught at George Washington University. It's being taught at the University of Maryland. It's being taught at UCLA, USC. People understand that there is a system that's been inside of our body that is antagonized by plant-based cannabinoids that stimulate our own endogenous cannabinoids that have a specific role. Our endogenous cannabinoids are the only cannabinoids, are really the only chemicals in our body that run in retrograde. Rather than starting in the brain and running to the periphery, it starts in the periphery and runs to the brain. And what does it do? Especially when it comes to anandamide, we know that anandamide tells the brain, okay, you sent enough white blood cells, calm down. Don't over white blood cell this thing, cause too much of a reaction. Meaning, let's say if I stub my toe and I'm walking down the hallway, ouch, I'm going to hurt pain my toe. Well, our brain reacts to that and sends, anandamide down there that says, give me some more white blood cells, give me more white cells. And then as the white blood cells come down and got enough, then the anandamide says, stop. You don't need that much more because we keep sending it down and now we'll start damaging good material. So understanding that, and that's really what set me on my journey for cannabis. Because if you look up the, what's it called? Not the summary, but the, every single patent has basically a paragraph that explains why the patent was given and what the patent is for. If you look up patent number 6630507A, which is the patent for cannabinoids, primarily CBD, it explains how CBD has so many effects inside the body, one of which is to help reduce inflammation. When I saw those words, I recognized, wow, okay, let me take a look at this stuff. And as I started looking, we started to realize that, unfortunately, because of so much misinformation and so many lies being told about cannabis over the course of the last 100 years, here in the United States led the world's journey into trying to reduce the minor cannabinoids in cannabis and increase the level of THC in cannabis. And THC does have more than just a euphoric property in cannabis. Mm-hmm. It also has an anti-inflammatory property. They note that in some of the studies that were done in Israel, we recognize that it has some profound effect on the cellular development of cancer cells, blocking their proliferation in some ways. So without that knowledge, the Golden Triangle in the Northwest of the United States started trying their best to grow the minor cannabinoids out of cannabis and increase the THC levels of cannabis, which was really affecting the overall effect that cannabis had in its ability to reduce inflammation. Because when you go into CBD and CBA and all the other chemicals, it doesn't have that pure effect that it would have. So when I realized that I needed to find a cannabis that was heavily steeped in CBD, had some CBG, CBN, CBC, some of the other monocannabinoids in it. When I realized that that's what I needed and went out trying to shop for that, I literally found some growers who literally were throwing away product that had too high CBD in it. Because, the CBD doesn't give you the same level of euphoria. So they thought that the people didn't want that. And I literally, for about 5 years, literally got almost all my product for free because I went to people and said, hey, if you have something high in CBD, I'll take it.
Oh,
You have to throw it away. I'll take it. And I started utilizing it and had profound effect out of it. And I still have profound effect out of it even to today.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I have a story where my aunt, who right now is going through stage 4 Leonidas plastica, and her doctors had she's been alive for 5 years, which is very fortunate because usually upon diagnosis, the patient has no more than 6 months to live. It's almost like pancreatic cancer. And she opted to do chemo. They wanted her to do it for 8 cycles. And after the first treatment, she came to me and said, I absolutely cannot do this. It's killing my body. It's too painful. And I said to her, you know what? I heard that CBD, there are tinctures, there are oils. Let me go to a dispensary and see if something like that might be able to help with the pain, with the neuropathy. And I was able to go get her enough cannabis to withstand and for her to be able to go through her 8 cycles of chemo. And she says if it were not for the cannabis, she doesn't think she would have been able to do that. And that was 5 years ago.
Yeah, there are so many stories. I do a podcast that's called Let's Be Blunt with Montel. And in my podcast, I have done right now to date well over 370 of them. 300 of them were patients, about 70 now. Sorry, about 250 have been with patients. The other, 130 or so has been with doctors and luminaries from around the world. Story after story after story after story. It's no longer the N of one. Story after story after story after story. I interview people who have had everything from pancreatic cancer all the way through to even glioblastomas, who have had some benefit from utilizing cannabis. Unfortunately, because we stopped the research in the United States and tried to get the world to stop researching cannabis, led by the United States forcing that, we are hundreds of years behind on what truly the capability of this plant may be.
Agree.
There has been some, one of the things that I find absolutely amazing is that if you really started to dig into a number of peer-reviewed, published documents on cannabis, you would realize that there's been well over 35,000 peer-reviewed, published documents on cannabis and cannabinoids and what they do, which is probably 10 times more than any other medication being sold in the world. Yet we sit back and act like there's not enough research, which is a bold lie and wrong. Because unless you could take something and extract it in a way that you can try to patent that molecule, the pharmaceutical industry doesn't find any value. And we're talking about a plant that is a weed. Let's get this straight. If you literally found a way to be able to grow it, and it doesn't have to be indoor, you can do it outside, outdoor, in a way that can limit exposure to molds and other pesticides, pesticide and pests and heavy metals. You've got something that literally doesn't need to be expensive to grow. But instead, what does our pharmaceutical industry do? They lie and claim that it costs so much to grow this purely. And when I do so, I could be like BW Pharmaceutical and charge thousands of dollars for dosages of something that shouldn't cost any more than pennies. And we recognize that, of course, utilizing cannabis is going to take some dollars out of the pharmaceutical industry's pocket. But if they promoted it and went at it the right way, they would probably find that it could be one of the most used chemicals on the planet to health and wellness worldwide.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you feel that obviously the healthcare system is there, I feel like to keep us dependent, obviously, on these pharmaceuticals. They don't want us to get better.
It's a sick care system.
That's
it's
right.
Not a health care system. This is a system that responds to sickness in a way that can only be remunerated by financial gain. When we finally get to a point, and we will, in the world, we're going to get to that spot probably, unfortunately, I may not be around when it happens, but in the next 30, 40 years, we're going to find that the masses aren't tolerated anymore from big business.
I agree. I feel that there is a movement where people are now becoming more advocates for themselves. And I wanted to ask you, besides conventional medicine, have you utilized other regenerative therapies to help with your MS?
I most definitely have, and will continue to do so. I'm hoping that people like yourself that are in that regenerative space will continue to do and pursue what I know you're pursuing, and that is trying to make this more affordable for all. But I definitely am a believer that, as we, again, Big Pharma likes to throw away even the concept of allowing individuals to have knowledge about alternatives, that we limit the ability to look at things like exosomes and look at things like, some of the other biologics that are out there right now, just peptides and things like that. So have I had treatments in exosomes? Absolutely. Have I had treatments with peptides? Absolutely. Will I continue to do so? Absolutely. And my only concern right now is the fact that the price tag is a little high. It does not have to be that high. I have looked at and watched some of the processes by which we develop these compounds. And I do know that, yes, there is an expense involved with setting up laboratories, getting them started. But once it's set up, ching, ching. And you know that. I mean, come on now. Once it's set up, okay, yeah, any business. If I want to be an automobile manufacturer, I got to put out the money to build that automobile factory. That's on me. That should not be on me to then charge the client for that. What we try to do is we make a car, make one inexpensive enough that the masses can buy, and we can make money. Same idea needs to come into this whole theory of biologic. We've got to start getting the people who are doing it, and we're working with companies all over the country. I think you know that are involved in distributing biologics, trying to figure out how, number one, we can make this more accessible to the masses.
I agree. And actually, so my clinic, One Body Medicine, I opened 3.5 years ago after my father passed of COVID pneumonia. And that's kind of my line to regenerative medicine. And when he was at Cedars, he was at the hospital, I was very disappointed with the level of care that he had. And I was there day in, day out for 9 to 11 days. And while I was sitting there, I thought about, this being a sick care system and not a healthcare system. And having my aunt, my uncle, and my mom all having dealt with cancer at some point in their life, saying, this is enough. We have to look into these other therapies and stay on the other side of medicine, be more proactive. And so the mission of my clinic is really to make these therapies more affordable. And I'm very happy to say that because it is unfortunate that insurance doesn't recognize these therapies as treatments for people that are sick. And it's a cash business. And so I think that with more information, more clinics like mine, hopefully, the masses and, the average person would be able to actually come in and get these therapies because they work.
Yeah, but I got to tell you something. One of the things that, and please do not take this as an aspersion. I am not complaining about what you do or anybody in this space does, but I've got to say to you, learn the lessons from the cannabis industry. Everybody in the cannabis, a lot of people got in the cannabis industry because they thought it was going to be this great green rush. And so they jump in, they try their best to see how fast they can, make enough money to buy the boat, to buy that Mercedes, to buy that Rolls Royce that sits out in the office, thinking that the Rolls Royce is going to impress people and don't have to make them knock on your door and try to figure out how to get what you got. And the industry still has not come together, the cannabis industry, in a way to even, though there are all these organizations out here that hold, conventions and rallies around the country that are all B2B, they forgot the B2C, which is the business to the consumer. Big Pharma never forgot that. It recognizes B2C. That's the reason why every time you turn on your television, all you see is commercials about the next drug that you can take. What the regenerative medicine organizations around the country that they need to do is stop pointing fingers at each other and saying they have bad product, they have bad product, they have bad product. I don't see it, didn't go see me. How about we are all working to provide
That's
good
right.
products,
Mm-hmm.
and we are policing ourselves and helping our peers to do a better job at providing good quality products. And when we're talking about these good quality products, let me tell you about a couple of them that I didn't invent, but so-and-so invented. And these are great products that we realize that are now impacting our cellular homeostasis at the mitochondrial level. When we start educating the consumer and letting them know that, okay, I know these words may be big for you when I say mitochondria and I say this and I say that, but let me just see if I can break it down. See, here's this cell, this little thing right here. And inside that cell, it's got all these really good things, but it also has a whole collection of nasty stuff that's caustic to the cell. And what we need to do is put as much stuff in here that we can eat up all that nasty stuff. Let's do it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. Let the average consumer understand. So what I'm doing is I'm not giving you something to put in your body that's going to contaminate you. I'm putting something in your body that's going to help clean up all that garbage that's inside those cells. And once I do that, guess what? That garbage can't turn into cancer. That garbage can't turn into, chronic heart disease. That garbage can't turn into, venous insufficiency. That garbage isn't going to be there. And with you, Johanna, I know that I'm preaching to the choir because you come to me with being recommended by, one of my leading authorities in that space. And I trust in him and believe in him because, fortunately, I can say, and I'll say it publicly so people know it, it's my son. But, if I was able to pass on anything gene-wise to him, it's been a brain that is inquisitive, a brain that wants knowledge, a brain that functions and lives off of knowledge, not just because they want to regurgitate a whole bunch of words. He lives off that knowledge because he believes in it. And he believes in what it's going to do to help others. So, I applaud you for what you do in trying your best to lower prices. It's going to take you a while because, I know. I mean, it's cost a lot to get you to where you are. There's no question. You have put the investment in. I believe you should be remunerated for all you do. However, let's start getting our remuneration by building that core group of patients that you have, taking it from the thousands. Let's get you to 100,000. Let's get you to 200,000. Let's get you to 1,000,000. Then you don't have to worry about driving the price up. You can keep that price here and still make the same amount of money. I want you to have that Rolls Royce, girlfriend. I want you to have that airplane in the backyard. Come on, man. However, let's get there 100,000 patients at a time.
And let's do it, the right way. For me,
Yes.
my heart is really in this, and it stems from having that, that personal connection with so many sick family members. And the sad thing is, I have aunts and uncles that are doctors and nurses, and they're there taking care of everybody else, and they're not taking care of themselves. It's the craziest thing. And
let me just throw this out at you. We could talk about this offline at some point in time if you want. But I'm going to tell you, if you look around America right now, our largest demographic with more disposable income than anybody else is who? It's the baby boomer. I'm one of them. And, and I say this, and I hope that no one gets upset about this, because I'm not trying to disparage age. However, the truth of the matter is, I'm in my last quarter. I know that for a fact. I'm in my last quarter. I've lived a very, very blessed life, and enjoyed every second of it. I've earned every single day that I've had on this planet. But I do know that in this last quarter, I can still live this last quarter robust, being a contributing member of the society, as long as I keep myself well. I know regenerative medicine can keep me in the game. And as I watch the game, like anybody who watched Sunday night's game, or with I think it was the Ravens, they got beaten in the last minute. Well, guess what? I can still score a touchdown in that last second of my last quarter. And I want to be in shape and well enough preserved that I can do so. I think that regenerative medicine can get me there. And so I'm working as hard as I can to continue to afford the treatment so that, I can still cross that finish line, cross that goal post, and look at the clock and it says 1 second, but I still made it.
Yep. I hear that. Montel, I have a question for you, because I'm discovering in my clinic a lot of patients that have come in not realizing that part of their illness and underlying conditions, like whether it's an autoimmune, Lyme, or other disease, is that we're testing them for environmental toxicities, and they're coming back. These results are coming back with mold, microplastics, heavy metals, and the numbers are insane. What are your thoughts about maybe having people shift more towards not just being health focused and their underlying condition, but looking at their environment, especially when we live today in a world that's highly processed. Our food system is toxic, it's poisoned with pesticides and all kinds of things. What are your thoughts on spreading more awareness to the environmental factors that are contributing to our sickness?
We have, let me tell you, I have arguments with publicists and with people who are campaign developers all the time about the fact that, we need to see how our footprint online is. We need to make sure that people can, catch our next little, Zoom, or catch our next little Facebook post. Let me tell you something. I think we've hit that spot where the seesaw can go either way. I really truly believe that the generation on this planet that needs us the most, which is baby boomers, who are trying to live out their life and take care of their kids and families, they would prefer to be touched. When I'm talking about touched in person, they don't necessarily have to do this. They would rather go out to a forum where they can sit in a room and have somebody walk in and have a conversation, and I can ask a question, raise my hand, they've seen it. I think much more of that needs to be done. I think people like yourself, myself, we need to team up and let's go across this country, one city at a time, hold rallies, and talk to people about how they can be more responsible for their healthcare footprint. The same way that we talked about in the last 20 years about being responsible for your carbon footprint, we need to be responsible for your healthcare footprint and how your footprint impacts the environment, impacts your own internal environment, and what you need to do to see if you can lessen that impact. So I agree with you. I think that the public is hungry.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just haven't caught up with how to feed them.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess I've been fortunate in my space so far to have partners and, other clinicians that I work with where we do try to share and lift everybody up, because I find that in this space, there's, people that have found their way to this side of medicine, have a personal connection, a personal journey of somebody that they love that might have received too many COVID vaccinations, for example, boosters and all kinds of things. And, are now realizing, wait a minute, I've been going to my doctor and doing everything they say. And now I don't understand what these things are inside of me that are, was it the vaccine that are creating illness that I didn't have before? And that's that whole, COVID vaccination and seeing patients coming into the clinic with all kinds of underlying diseases is so heartbreaking, to be honest. But I think I'm in agreement that we should all, continue doing this work and that people are awake and hopefully advocating more for themselves with information being more readily available. Montel, is there anything that you would like, to some last words for the listeners watching this show, you would like to give them words of encouragement if they might be dealing with a chronic illness?
I gotta tell you, I go back to what I said earlier. Unfortunately, too many people trained by our messaging and the messaging of the pharmaceutical industry are too quick to want to find the pill. They want to just give me the pill and that should take care of everything. And we know that doesn't, even when it comes to biologics and, regenerative medicine. The shot itself is not going to do the job. It's going to require you taking a look at your healthcare footprint, reducing some of the cost of chemicals that you're putting in your body, reducing some of the cost of behavior. Science has already stated unequivocally, we know the damage that alcohol does to our bodies.
That's right.
We've known this for thousands of years, yet we still want to promote, go grab that beer tonight, go grab that shot tonight. Take a look at any of the streaming services, movies. Almost all the heroes come home and grab, a 4-finger glass full of some brown liquor when they come home from work, thinking that, and they're proud to drink it right there in front of the screen for you. It's time for us to start figuring out what our individual responsibility is for ourselves, to ourselves, and then doing as much as we can, because the information is out there, doing as much as we can to try to see if we can reduce our healthcare footprint. Because, you said it at the beginning of this interview, my journey with MS, a lot of people don't know, I suffered a pretty extreme hemorrhagic stroke 7 years ago. The type of stroke that I suffered only kills 50 to 60% of people who have that type of stroke. I'm still here. And I'm here and I'm thriving because I paid attention to immediately. When that stroke happened, the second I started reading again while I was laying on that gurney in the hospital, I started reading about stroke. Tried to steep myself with the information that I needed to steep myself with to, number one, not prevent, but try to reduce the opportunity of that happening again. And blessedly, it hasn't happened for the last 8 years. So, this is a lifelong battle that we can be in, that we can win if we just get the information we need and make the changes we need to try to reduce the impact of the negative impact in our lives from the environment, from what we eat, and other things.
I agree. Thank you so much, Montel, for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and you're such an inspiration.
Oh, no, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And, let's offline have a conversation. Because I know what you guys are doing. And I just really believe that now's the time.
Yeah.
They're, the masses are ready. They're open. Let's start filling them with the information that they need to know.
Agree. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, ma'am, for sure. You're welcome.
This podcast is sponsored and brought to you by One Body Medicine. You can learn more by visiting onebodymedicine.com. That's the number 1, bodymedicine.com. You can also follow the show on social media under the handle Pure Wellness Pod. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.